All right, ready to dive into some 80s horror?
Always.
Tonight, we're going back to high school.
Ooh, fun.
But with a much darker twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's prom night.
Prom night.
Prom night, but with a killer on the loose.
Okay, yeah, now you've got my attention.
We're deep diving into Prom Night, the 1980s slasher that turned a night of celebration into a total nightmare.
I've seen this one. It's a classic.
It is, and we're going to go beyond the surface.
Oh, good.
We've got the Wikipedia entry for the film, so...
Excellent source.
Yeah, we're going to dig into the details.
Okay, let's do it.
Now, most people know the basic premise, right? You've got a masked killer
Right.
stalking and slashing high school seniors.
At their prom.
At their prom, exactly.
Very.
Seeking revenge for, well, it all goes back to a childhood accident.
Ah, the classic revenge plot.
Classy.
But there's always more to the story, right?
Always. Like, did you know that this film, Prom Night, almost ended up with a completely different studio?
No, I didn't.
Paramount Pictures.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They were the ones who released
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th, just a couple of months before Prom Night.
Wow, so like back-to-back slashers in the summer of 80.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
Wild. What would that have done to the genre?
Right. I mean, would it have been...
I mean, would they have even released it so close together?
Right, or would it have, like, amplified that whole slasher craze even more?
Totally.
Yeah. But let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Back to the beginning, before all the blood and the glitter.
Yeah, take us back.
So it's the late 70s.
Disco era.
Disco's everywhere.
That's not bad.
And horror movies, they're starting to, you know...
Really take off.
Yeah, they're gaining popularity.
Yeah.
And you've got this director, Paul Lynch.
Okay.
And he really loves horror, you know?
Passionate about the genre.
Yeah, passionate, and he's ready to make his mark.
Make a name for himself.
Exactly. So he teams up with this writer.
Okay.
Robert Guza Jr.
Guza Jr., okay.
And they're like, okay, let's make a horror movie. But the initial idea...
What was it?
They called it Don't Go See the Doctor.
Don't Go See the Doctor. That doesn't sound very promy.
Not at all, right? Like, I'm thinking murderous physician, not exactly the vibe.
Not really.
So how did they go from, you know, scalpels to sequined dresses?
Right, that's quite a jump.
Right. Well, it was actually the producer,
Oh, okay.
Erwin Yablans,
Yeah.
and he was like, hey, guys, you know, what about a holiday theme?
Holiday theme, okay.
And boom,
Prom Night was born.
Prom Night is born.
Interesting.
So they took this idea of teenagers haunted by this, like,
Shared trauma.
shared trauma, and they're like, let's set it during prom.
Clever. Very clever.
Prom, the ultimate high school event.
Yeah.
So we've got the concept, but now we need
Part of the cast.
a cast. And Prom Night snagged a pretty big name.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Well, a young, up-and-coming actress, fresh off the success of another horror film,
Okay.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis, right out of Halloween.
Wow, so she was already becoming a horror icon.
Exactly. So her being in the movie, it brought, like, instant credibility.
Yeah,
Could
definitely.
probably help them get the money they needed to actually make the film.
For sure. She was a big draw.
Yeah, it makes you think, how did her involvement shape the movie?
Right, because she was already, like, the Scream Queen.
Exactly.
Did that influence the direction they took?
Right. Or was she maybe trying to do something different?
That's a good point. Maybe she wanted to show some range.
Yeah, break out of that Scream Queen mold a little.
Told him.
But speaking of range, there's another big name in this film,
Oh.
and you'd never guess it.
Okay, give me a hint.
All right, so think. Deadpan delivery, slapstick comedy,
Okay.
and a whole lot of hilarious innuendo later in his career.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about Leslie Nielsen?
Leslie Nielsen.
No way.
Yes.
The comedy legend.
The comedy legend, but this is like way before Airplane and The Naked Gun.
Right.
He was known for serious roles back then.
Wow, that's wild.
Can you imagine seeing him in this horror movie?
It must have been such a different experience.
Right.
Seeing him in a totally serious role.
Totally.
It's like a glimpse into a different dimension of his talent.
Yeah. And the director, Paul Lynch, he really went for an interesting mix of actors.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
You've got Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
And Leslie Nielsen.
Huge names.
And then, you know, some experienced stage actors and some newcomers, too.
Oh, like who?
So there's Michael Tuff playing Kim's brother, Alex.
Okay.
And Mary Beth Rubins, she plays Kelly Lynch.
Okay.
And it's interesting because they all brought their own, like,
Their own style, their own background.
Yeah, like it wasn't just a bunch of random teenagers.
Right, a real ensemble.
Yeah, real ensemble, yeah.
Bringing something unique.
Exactly.
So where did they film this Prom Night Horror Fest?
Well, they actually shot the whole thing in Toronto.
Toronto,
Canada.
Oh, cool.
In just 24 days.
24 days.
24 days.
That's a tight schedule.
Yeah, imagine the pressure.
Wow.
They used actual locations, like
Oh, like what?
they used Don Mills Collegiate Institute for the high school
Okay.
and the Langstaff jail farm for that creepy abandoned building.
Oh, that's cool. Using real places.
Yeah, adds to the atmosphere, right?
Totally.
And the art director, Reuben Freed.
Okay.
He really leaned into Toronto's architecture.
Really?
Yeah, all those Victorian buildings, all like Gothic.
It gives the film a very specific look.
It does.
So do they do anything special to like build the chemistry between the actors?
Oh, absolutely. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Tuff.
The on-screen siblings?
Yeah, they actually went shopping together before filming.
Really?
Yeah, to like bond and build that sibling connection.
That's awesome. Going the extra mile.
Yeah, it shows.
It definitely does.
So we've got this great concept, talented actors, a director with a vision.
Right.
But let's not forget, Prom Night is a slasher.
Oh, yeah.
And that means
violence.
And this was like the golden age of slashers, right? So audiences were expecting.
Blood and guts.
They wanted to see it, yeah.
Yeah.
So how did the director, Paul Lynch, how did he handle that?
Right. Did he embrace the gore or go for something different?
Well, from what I've read,
Okay.
Lynch wasn't into, like...
gratuitous gore?
Yeah, gratuitous gore. He wanted the violence to,
serve the story.
Yeah, not be the main attraction.
Right.
But, as always, there's the studio.
Oh, boy, here we go.
Right. And the studio...
They want what sells.
They want what sells.
Yep.
And this was Avco Embassy Pictures.
Okay.
And they were like, we need a big, shocking scene.
Oh, I know what's coming.
They wanted to give the audience what they wanted, and that's how we got
the beheading.
The infamous beheading in the finale.
Lou Farmer's head rolling across the dance floor.
Yeah, so shocking, so audacious.
I bet the special effects were something else.
Oh, they went all out.
Really?
Yeah, they had a special floor with a hole for the actor's head.
What?
And a dummy head molded around a prop skull for the actual,
decapitation.
Yeah, no CGI back then, pure practical effects.
That's impressive.
It really is.
It really is.
But, amidst all the blood and terror, Prom Night also has its moments of, pure teenage joy.
Of course, it's prom.
And what better way to capture that than with some killer disco tunes?
Absolutely. The music is crucial.
And the prom scenes in this film, they're iconic.
Yeah, I can see why.
But get this, those scenes were originally filmed using...
You don't get that they splurged on the sound.
They tried. They used popular disco tracks.
Not quite.
Like Gloria Gaynor, Donna Summer, Cheryl Lynn.
No way. Talk about setting the mood.
I know, right? Can you imagine? I Will Survive playing while they're all dancing.
Amazing.
But
yeah.
Budget, it had other plans.
Oh, no, they couldn't afford the rights.
They couldn't afford it.
What did they do?
They brought in a composer, Paul Zaza.
Okay.
And they said, Paul, we need you to create sound-alike tracks.
Wow, what a challenge.
And he had 5 days.
5 days?
5 days to compose and record all these new tracks.
That's insane. He must have been channeling the disco gods.
He must have.
But I'm guessing the original artists weren't too happy about this.
You guessed it. A copyright lawsuit was filed.
Oh, boy. How much were they asking for?
$10 million.
$10 million for disco music.
That's Hollywood for you.
Wow. So did they have to pay up?
They settled out of court.
For how much?
Much smaller amount, $50,000.
Still a chunk of change.
Still a chunk of change, but yeah.
So even the music has its own drama.
It does. We've talked about the concept, the cast, the violence, the disco drama.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. What's next on our prom night journey?
Well, now we can get to the release and how people reacted.
Okay.
Because, believe it or not, Prom Night's path to success wasn't exactly a smooth one.
Oh, really? I thought it was a hit.
Not right away.
Tell me more. I'm all ears.
Okay, so when Prom Night first hit theaters, it wasn't like those big blockbuster releases we see today.
Yeah. Oh, so it wasn't like a nationwide prom night premiere.
Not exactly. It started smaller.
Smaller.
Yeah, they did a limited release in July of 1980.
Limited release?
Yeah, so it opened in a few cities first, like Chicago, Milwaukee, and Louisville.
Okay. Interesting strategy.
Yeah, it was common back then. especially for independent films, you know?
Yeah, especially in the horror genre.
Right, they'd test the waters, see how audiences reacted.
Yeah, and
Then, if it did well, they'd expand the release.
Okay, so like a slow burn.
Exactly. Build the hype gradually.
So did it work? Did Prom Night win over those early audiences?
It did. Word of mouth started spreading, and it became, what they call a sleeper hit.
A sleeper hit.
Yeah, and by August, they were able to release it in bigger cities like New York and Los Angeles.
Okay, so it went from small town to the big time.
Yeah, and the box office numbers, they kept climbing.
So even without a huge marketing blitz, it found its audience.
Exactly. People were talking about it.
That's pretty impressive.
It is, but how did it compare to, the other big slasher hit of that year?
Friday the 13th.
Yeah, Friday the 13th.
Well, that's a good question.
It is. Friday the 13th, it had a much bigger budget, a wider release.
Yeah.
It ended up making more money overall domestically, but Prom Night, it still did really well.
Yeah, for a smaller film, it held its own.
It did. It made almost $15 million in the U.S.
Wow.
And it actually became Canada's highest-earning horror film of 1980.
That's amazing.
Yeah, not bad for a movie that, started small.
It's like the little prom queen that could.
Exactly.
Okay.
But box office numbers, they don't tell the whole story, right?
No, they don't.
So what do the critics think?
Yeah, what was the reaction to Prom Night?
Well, it was a mixed bag, to be honest.
Mixed bag.
Yeah, some critics, they really like it. They praised the suspense, the atmosphere.
Yeah.
They thought Jamie Lee Curtis gave a great performance.
Yeah, she's always good.
Yeah, and they liked how the movie, played on those anxieties around Prom Night.
Right, taking something familiar like prom and turning it into something terrifying.
Exactly.
But you said mixed reviews.
I did. There's some criticisms, too.
Like what?
Well, some found the plot a bit predictable,
Okay, yeah.
and the characters, maybe a little stereotypical.
Okay,
And there were also concerns about the depiction of violence against women.
right. That was a common trope in slasher films back then.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
And some critics felt that Prom Night didn't really challenge those tropes.
Interesting. Those conversations about representation, they've evolved so much over time.
They really have.
Were there any reviews that really stood out to you?
Well, Gene Siskel, from Siskel and Ebert,
Oh, yeah, the famous duo.
he reviewed Prom Night, and he compared it to Halloween and Carrie.
Okay.
And he thought it was kind of a watered-down version of both.
Interesting.
But he also mentioned that it wasn't as violent as the ads made it seem.
Oh, so maybe the studio was playing up the gore factor in the marketing?
Could be, yeah, trying to attract a wider audience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And actually, Siskel and Ebert, they were very vocal about their dislike for how slasher films were marketed, especially those that focused on, women in danger.
Right.
They even dedicated a whole episode of their show to criticizing those campaigns.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It was. They felt like those ads exploited those fears rather than exploring them in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I can see their point.
And it's interesting to think about how those critiques might have influenced the genre.
Did filmmakers start to change their approach?
It's hard to say for sure, but
Okay.
those conversations, they definitely had an impact.
Yeah, it makes you think.
It does, it does.
So Prom Night, maybe not a critical darling, but it definitely sparked some important discussions.
Yeah, about the genre, about representation.
And did it receive any awards or recognition?
It did. It got 2 Genie Award nominations.
Genie Award.
Yeah, those are like the Canadian Oscars.
Oh, okay, cool.
So for Prom Night to be nominated, that's a big deal.
It is. What were the nominations for?
One for editing and one for Jamie Lee Curtis's performance.
That's awesome. Recognition for the craft.
Absolutely. But a film's journey, it doesn't end at the box office, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
So what happened after Prom Night left the big screen?
Well, it found a new life on television.
Really?
Yeah, it became a hot commodity for TV networks.
Wow.
The Canadian CTV network, they paid a record-breaking $200,000 to air it 3 times.
That's a lot of money for back then.
It is. And NBC in the U.S., they paid even more, $3.25 million for 2 primetime broadcasts.
Wow. Prom Night was a hit on the small screen, too.
It was, but TV back then, they had censors.
Oh, yeah, they couldn't show everything.
Right, so did they have to cut stuff out of Prom Night?
They did, but here's the thing.
Right.
They also added some scenes back in.
Really?
Yeah, they created a slightly longer version for television.
So like a director's cut?
Kind of. They added some deleted scenes, extended others.
Wow, so the TV audience got a different version.
They did.
Interesting.
That is.
What kind of scenes did they add?
Well, there's a scene with Kim's parents, meeting with a psychologist.
Okay.
It hints at their trauma after losing their daughter, Robin.
Right, that happened years before the events of the film.
Exactly. And there are some extended scenes with the other classmates, too.
Oh, like giving them more depth?
Yeah, fleshing out their personalities.
Interesting. Those little changes could change the whole feel of the film.
Definitely makes you think about what the director intended.
Yeah, it does.
So from theaters to television, Prom Night found its audience.
But what about home video?
Oh, that's a whole other chapter in Prom Night's journey.
I bet. VHS tapes, those were the days.
They were. And Prom Night made its way onto those tapes in 1981.
Right when home video was taking off.
Yeah, it's a game changer. Suddenly you could watch movies anytime you wanted.
At home.
In your pajamas.
Yeah. No more waiting for the movie to come on TV.
Exactly.
And I bet that helped Prom Night become even more popular.
Oh, for sure. It cemented its cult status.
But the home video releases didn't stop there, right?
Nope. In 1988, Virgin Vision re-released it on VHS.
Okay.
And they released the sequel at the same time.
Wait, sequel.
Yep. Hello, Mary Lou? Prom Night 2.
Prom Night 2, we haven't even talked about the sequels yet.
Oh, the sequels are a whole other story.
They are.
They are, but we'll get to those in a bit.
Okay, keep me in suspense.
I will.
So, we've got VHS tapes, sequels on the horizon. What's next in Prom Night's home video evolution?
Well, remember Anchor Bay Entertainment?
Yeah, the company known for releasing cult films.
Exactly. They jumped on the Prom Night train in 1997.
What did they do?
They released standard and collector's editions on VHS.
For the die-hard fans?
Yeah, those who still love their VHS tapes.
But technology marches on, right?
It does. So in 1998, Anchor Bay gave Prom Night a proper upgrade.
An upgrade?
A remastered widescreen DVD release.
Okay, so for our listeners who don't remember DVDs.
Right, those ancient artifacts.
Why was this widescreen release so special?
Well, it's all about the aspect ratio.
Oh, what?
Aspect ratio. It's basically the shape of the picture.
Okay.
You see, on VHS, most films were full screen, which meant they were cropped to fit a square TV screen.
Right, so you're missing parts of the picture.
Exactly. But many films, especially those made later, were shot in a wider format.
So you're seeing more of what the director intended.
Exactly. And that's what the DVD offered, the full, uncropped picture.
That's cool.
It was a revelation for fans.
I bet. Like seeing the film for the first time again.
Yeah. And they didn't stop there. The DVD also had bonus features.
Bonus feature.
Yeah. Trailers, behind-the-scenes stuff, interviews.
That's awesome.
Is a real treat for fans.
But DVDs, they're becoming a bit outdated too, aren't they?
They are, sadly.
So what about Blu-ray streaming? Has Prom Night made the jump to those platforms?
Well, eventually that Anchor Bay DVD, it went out of print.
Oh no! So how could people watch it?
Well, for a while it was hard to find.
Yeah.
But thankfully, another company came to the rescue. Synapse Films. They're known for their amazing restorations of cult films.
Okay.
And in 2014, they released a beautiful Blu-ray edition of Prom Night.
Awesome.
And get this, they used the original film negatives
Yo.
to create a 4K restoration.
So the best possible quality.
The best. And they included all those old bonus features, plus a new documentary.
A documentary.
Yeah, about the making of the film with interviews and everything.
That's incredible, like a time capsule of Prom Night history.
It is.
So from VHS to Blu-ray, Prom Night has had quite a journey.
It has. And it shows how much this film continues to resonate with audiences.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason.
It is. And it's interesting to think about why.
Why does Prom Night still captivate people after all these years?
That's a great question. And I think it has to do with those universal fears, you know?
Like what?
Prom itself, it's such a significant event for teenagers.
Yeah, it's a rite of passage.
Exactly. It's full of expectations, pressures,
Yeah.
and the potential for both, joy and heartbreak.
It's like a powder keg of emotions.
It is. And Prom Night takes all that and throws in a killer.
Yeah, it twists the familiar into something terrifying.
Exactly. It plays on those fears of being vulnerable, exposed.
Right, of having your secrets revealed.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also a product of its time, you know?
The 80s.
The 80s, yeah, the fashion, the music, the whole vibe.
Yeah, there's a certain nostalgia to it.
Totally.
And the performances, they're really good.
Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis, she's amazing.
She is. She brings so much to the role.
And even Leslie Nielsen.
Right. Even though he's not doing comedy here.
He still brings something special to the film.
Yeah, he plays the principal, and he's dealing with the tragedy, but he's also a father who lost his daughter.
Right, there's a lot going on with his character.
There is. It's more nuanced than you might expect from a slasher.
And that's what makes Prom Night stand out?
Yeah, it's not just about the scares.
It's about the characters, the emotions.
Exactly, and that's why it stays with you.
So Prom Night, it's more than just a slasher flick.
It's a time capsule, a cultural phenomenon.
And it's a story that continues to resonate with people.
Definitely.
All right, before we say goodbye to Prom Night forever.
Not forever.
Well, you know what I mean.
I do.
Let's take a moment to revisit some of the things we learned about Prom Night. Because sometimes the stories behind the film are just as fascinating as the film itself.
Oh, absolutely. Those little details, they add so much.
They do. So what was your favorite fact, something that really surprised you?
That's tough. But I think for me, it's got to be Leslie Nielsen being in the movie.
Leslie Nielsen, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine? You're sitting in the theater in 1980, and there he is, the future Frank Drebin, totally serious.
Right. The king of comedy, playing a dramatic role.
It makes you wonder, did those early roles influence his later work?
It's possible, right? Maybe playing it straight helped him develop that amazing comedic timing.
It's a cool thought, like he needed that foundation to really shine later on.
And speaking of unexpected turns, there's the whole disco music saga.
Oh yeah, the sound-alike tracks.
Imagine Donna Summer, Gloria Gaynor, their music actually playing in the prom scenes.
It would have been epic.
It would have, but then the budget's like, nope.
Reality bites.
And they bring in Paul Zaza, give him 5 days to recreate all these iconic songs.
5 days. Talk about pressure.
And then, to top it off, a $10 million copyright lawsuit.
You can't make this stuff up.
It's crazy, right? But it shows how important music is to a film.
It sets the tone, the mood.
Without the right music, Prom Night wouldn't be the same.
Definitely not. It would lose that whole disco horror vibe.
And beyond all that, we have to acknowledge Prom Night's impact on the genre itself.
Yeah, it's not just a standalone film.
It spawned sequels, a reboot, even a musical.
It clearly struck a chord with people.
It did. It tapped into something universal, those fears we all have.
About growing up, about fitting in, about what could go wrong on a night that's supposed to be perfect.
Yeah, and it did it with style, with atmosphere, with those amazing performances from Jamie Lee Curtis and Leslie Nielsen.
It's a film that stays with you.
It does, and we hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for Prom Night.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface.
But hopefully it's enough to make you want to go back, watch it again, maybe notice things you didn't see before.
Or listen to the music a little differently.
Yeah, think about the choices the filmmakers made.
And how those choices shaped the film we know and love.
Because that's what these deep dives are all about,
Yeah?
Exploring the films we love, learning something new.
And sharing that with other fans.
So if you haven't seen Prom Night, check it out.
Give it a watch.
And if you have seen it, well, maybe it's time for a rewatch.
With fresh eyes.
Exactly, because there's always something new to discover.
And as always, keep those lights on.
Sweet dreams.